Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing? I didn't get a chance to do my message this morning, so we're doing it right now. I'm trying to beat the mosquitoes this evening, so let's just say it's an afternoon message today. I had some errands I had to run. I had a issue dealing with someone with a lost phone and having to get a new phone this morning. Not me. I keep up with myself. Anyway, we finished the book of Kings yesterday. The 2 Kings yesterday. We went all the way through Kings and 2 Kings. And now I decided, I talked to the Lord and I said, I don't know what to do next. He set me on that path in Kings when I started doing this. And he said, just keep going. So, turn to 1 Chronicles. And 1 Chronicles. I started to read the Chronicles and I was like, the first part of Chronicles is one of them sections of the book. There's a lot of books that begin with these long genealogies. And these are sections that a lot of people, when they look at the Bible and they start reading this, they're like, what is this point? It's just these genealogies of, all these people and these names and just one right after the other, and, they get lost. So, the Lord told me, he said, maybe you need to explain what the importance of having these are. So that's what we're going to do today. The title of today's message, we're actually going to look at 1 Chronicles chapters 1 through 9, because the first part of the book, these first 9 chapters are pretty much just just genealogies. And the title of the message is The Spine of Scripture, Tracing the Tribes from Adam to the True King, in 1 Chronicles 1 through 9. The purpose of these dense names and lineages, as I said, most people look at them and they're just obscure, they're hard to understand, and they don't understand the importance of them. And, they often will overlook or ignore them, and because, they can get tedious. But the importance of these genealogies are, it's like you have a book and you have a spine of the book. The human body has a spine, and it's the support. The spine of the book is the support of the book. Our spine is our support. So the genealogies are like the spine of Scripture. Just like the spine of the book or the spine of your body, they provide a pillar that provides us the support of this continuity of the entire story. And in the start of these first 9 chapters of Chronicles, this was important for the discouraged post-exile community. The community had just come out of exile, and it was important to the community of Jerusalem. And it was important because they served this vital function of a verifiable historical framework that affirmed their identity as the legitimate heirs of covenant. And so by meticulously, the author of Chronicles, by meticulously tracing the tribes through both their failures and their triumphs, um, they ensured that the lines of the priest, which was from the tribe of Levi, which was the Levites, and the future true king, which came from the line of tribe of Judah and David's line, remained unbroken. They wanted to show that this line was an unbroken line, and this provided this immovable support for all the hope and prophecy that would follow. And so, uh, this book contains the most extensive set of genealogies in the Bible, um, and uh, it covers the history of Israel from Adam to this post-exile community in Jerusalem, and so it serves as this theological and historical prologue um, that anchors the identity of the returned exiles to God's unbroken plan. Shows how, God had a plan, and he brought it about through all these generations and all this and this unbroken lineage. So, as I said, the primary purpose was to establish this continuity and demonstrate that the people returning from the Babylonian exile were the legitimate heirs of God's covenantal promises, particularly the promises that he made to David, that his throne would endure forever, and that the promise of the king that would come from his line, the true king, which was Jesus. So the first chapter uh, of this the first section of these chapters would which is chapter 1, is the line from Adam to Israel. It goes for Adam, Noah, Shem, Abraham, and this highlights. This is like the anchor, the historical anchor. Um, shows the line of Shem. Shem highlights the divine election that leads to the covenant people establishing the history of Israel within the universal history of mankind. And then it highlights covenantal distinction, or clearly defines the boundary between Israel, Jacob, and their neighbors, emphasizing that the promises follow the line of Isaac and Jacob, confirming Israel's unique role. So the line goes, from Abraham, Isaac, Ishmael, and Esau, but that shows that this through the line of Shem. But then it shows the distinction through, Jacob from the neighbors that would spur from this lineage. Then chapter 2 methodically traces the 12 tribes, giving special emphasis to 3: Judah, which was the royal line, and Levi, which was the priesthood, and Benjamin, which is King Saul's tribe. And the focus of this lineage was on Judah and the royal tribe and the family of David, of course, because this is the line, like I said, the royal line which the true king would come from. And it highlights the Davidic covenant. The line is traced through Perez and Hezron directly to the family of David, and this is the most important line for the Chronicle in this book, because it affirms the legitimacy and preservation of the royal dynasty for the future Messiah. It also includes Jabez's prayer as an interlude promoting faithfulness and piety for receiving God's blessing. Now, then in this chapter 2 has Jabez's prayer included. It also focuses on Simeon, Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh starting in chapter 4. And this highlights a warning against unfaithfulness. The genealogy of Reuben in chapter 5 mentions his loss of birthright due to defiling his father's bed, emphasizing consequences of sin and loss of blessing. And then the Transjordan tribes were the first to be carried into exile due to their faithfulness, a stark warning to the returning community. And then in chapter 6, the lineage focus is on Levi, which is the priestly tribe, and it highlights the centrality of worship in the temple. It's the longest tribal list, stressing the legitimacy and organization of the priesthood and the Levites. For the post-exile community rebuilding the temple, this list was vital for restoring proper worship and divine order and emphasizing holiness. Then chapter 7, the lineage focus is Issachar, Zebulun, Naphtali, Ephraim, Asher, and Benjamin, and it highlights the unity of all Israel and the lesson of Saul. This list ensures all 12 tribes are accounted for, promoting national unity. The section on Benjamin in chapter 8 leads into the line of King Saul, who was the failed king. And this sets a contrast for the later narrative focus on David, who is the faithful king. Then we go into chapter 9, which the lineage focus is the priests, Levites, gatekeepers, and other temple servants. And the themes, it highlights the restored community, and the list details the first families who resettled Jerusalem after the exile, verifying their identity and the return to the Aaronic priesthood. And it formally reconnects the returning remnant to their historical and religious roots, confirming the continuity of God's covenant people. Then also in chapter 9, you get the genealogy of Saul repeated, and this highlights the lesson of kingship. By repeating Saul's lineage, it serves as a prologue to the narrative of his death in chapter 10, emphasizing that his downfall was due to his unfaithfulness to the Lord, and it acts as a cautionary tale. Obedience is the key to national and personal prosperity. So the reason I'm going through this right now to talk about these genealogies and to talk about how this was tracing these tribes is because I didn't think that going through chapter by chapter of these, since all these genealogies and there's not much stories there, there's just a few. But we pick up like in chapter 9 when it talks about Saul and chapter 10 about his death. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start tomorrow with starting with Saul. And then go through Chronicles, starting from the story of Saul. But I just wanted to go through this to show what this first part of this book meant about all these genealogies, so that you understand why I'm going to kind of skip a few chapters, because there's importance there, but the importance is as this list as a whole. It's not so much going verse by verse through this list, but it's as this list as a whole. And so these 9 chapters of genealogies, as I said, are a statement of identity, continuity, and hope for discouraged people. And the main story comes to this point where, it takes up really with Saul, is where the main parts of this book will uh, come to need to be studied in depth. Is I guess what I'm saying. Um, but these genealogies serve, as I said, as the spine of the entire biblical narrative, really, linking God's initial creative act to the ongoing story of redemption. This meticulous listing of names authenticates the fact that the Messiah would come from the specific divinely preserved lines of Adam through Abraham to Judah and then to David. And this historical foundation makes the claim of the gospel, which is that Jesus Christ is the rightful king. And it makes it verifiable. This genealogy is the verification that Jesus is the one true king that was prophesied in this book, this entire book. And of course, Matthew begins the Gospel of Matthew begins with a similar selective type genealogy to prove Jesus' royal right to the throne. Um, each, like I said, each one of them is it has some differences, but it's all it proves the same line, that he came from that same lineage. And it shows this proves the unbroken covenant. That God uh, how God preserved this through these generations. Hold on just a second. And despite Israel's failures and the devastation of the exile, the list proved that God kept his promises. The lines of the king, Judah, David, and the priest Levi are intact, pointing directly to Christ, who fulfills the dual roles as the great high priest and the eternal king. And it's also, this section gives us highlights some principles for our spiritual growth, and that it shows that obedience brings blessing. This scattered narrative interludes the interludes of the Transjordan tribes and the success of faithful individuals like Jabez shows us that obedience to God and His law leads to blessings in life, and while unfaithfulness leads to judgment and exile. So our spiritual growth requires active, intentional obedience to God's commands. It also highlights the priority of worship. The greatest emphasis is on the tribe of Levi and the organization of the temple personnel in chapter 6 and 9. And this shows that the restoration of the true worship is paramount to God's plan. And for our spiritual growth it shows that it's intimately tied to our spiritual growth, to this right relationship and worship of God is tied to it. But it's very important. And the individual significance highlighted in this is when we often want to skip these lists. these genealogies. But we need to know the importance of that God preserved these for a reason, and He preserved every one of these names and every family, and you know, every one of these individuals in these families um, affirm that He knows each person intimately, and He knows each person's role, what plan He has for them. So it inspires personal accountability and reminds, or should remind, each one of it, each believer, that our life and our obedience and our, you know, whether we're obedient or whether we're unfaithful, uh, matters and has historical and eternal significance within God's grand plan. So we we may not want to sit through these genealogies and study them in depth, um, but they are important to trace that lineage. They might become a little tedious at times, but as I said, when we go through them, I know when I traced my lineage, my genealogy, I did that for at one point. You know, just look at my family tree, just searching, you know, to find some connection, to find out, you know, to think about things that help me to think about God's plan for not only my life but how through those generations that He brought about, how I came to be. And so when we look at those genealogies, Jesus's genealogies, it opens our eyes up in a way that if we didn't study them, it wouldn't, to where how God had His hand in everything, in every moment, in every life, making sure that this line was preserved and that Jesus, the Messiah, would ultimately come from this line and was the fulfillment of His plan. Uh, it shows how God is active in history. History is not something that just happens. It's all laid out. It's all part of the plan. So that's the importance of these names and these genealogies. Uh, and as I said, tomorrow I'm going to start with our in-depth storytelling on Saul, King Saul. So I guess that's uh, it for the lesson today. I hope y'all got something out of it. Um, Maybe y'all can, you know, read through these chapters real quick and see how these names connect, and 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 medicate and think about how, you know, how many generations this was that God was laying out the groundwork for the true king. Anyway, I love y'all. I'll see y'all back here tomorrow.